From baby boomers to millennials and Gen Z, what exactly is it that defines a generation?
我是一名90后
，90后的，我是90后，98年出生的。
Whether it's how others view them,
他们就是很浪费了，吃的跟我们不一样。
有人说他们可能会稍微可能懒一点。
or how they view themselves.
我们目前呢，基本上是上班族比较累吧。
现在90后以自我中心会比较更多一点。
The consensus from those we've spoken to as we travel across China is those born here in the 1990s and 2000s have not only been shaped by the ups and downs of China's rapid development, but are now the new driving force shaping the world's second largest economy today.
我叫小周，我大名叫周妍，然后是95年生的。
It's been a challenging period for 27-year-old Zhou Yan. Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit, she's lost 2 jobs in the span of just over a year. The 2 companies she'd worked for in the F&B industry taking a hit due to lockdowns and restrictions under China's strict zero-COVID policy.
第一次的时候，有点无法接受吧，然后第2次的时候就，好吧，就这样吧。
A native of eastern China's Anhui province, Zhou Yan moved to Nanjing in neighboring Jiangsu province after graduating in 2017.
南京比较老，它没有北上广深那么快，那么的现代化和发达。我有一位要好的南京的朋友就去了北京发展，确实他在北京有很好的工作机会，但是我觉得他也付出了时间，可能我在南京，生活节奏稍微慢一些。 因为我不想去那么拼，我想有更多自己的时间，然后有自己的生活吧。我目前工作是在一家做金融数据类的公司，然后做视频类的插画师，做动画。一方面是责任，另一方面，我乐于在这种比较常规化和看似单调的工作中。 找一些自己的乐趣。业余在合肥有支乐队叫做 Triple Fail， 我在里面弹贝斯。工作6天或者5天，然后1天来排练，我就觉得我把所有的一些不好的那些情绪都发泄出来了。
Dealing with China's work culture is something that Zhou Yan's indie band is all too familiar with. All juggle full-time jobs on top of their band practice and gigs. All except its lead singer, known as Manager Chen, are born in the 1990s. Born just 2 years shy of the 90s in 1988, the songs he's written have resonated with the band's young millennial fans.
这个你能够触及到的，与你理想当中你希望过的生活的这种差别，这就是我觉得可能会描述到年轻人的一个相对比较困难的一个处境吧。比如说还有一首歌叫《A Low Altitude Flow》。 就是说，让我们去挥霍啊什么的，然后目击这个时光的这种流逝什么的。
American Zach Dykewall has spent over a decade on China work. A millennial himself, born in 1990, he's lived in the country and wrote a book about China's youth.
So when we think about the older generation in China, there's anthropologists who refer to them as 吃苦的一代, so the eat bitter generation, right? Eat bitter means to do difficult things for long periods of time. at the prospect of delayed gratification. If they have sort of their parents were coming of age in the 1980s, you're talking about the beginning of the manufacturing era in China, where you could work longer, earn more, and impact your family's lives. This younger generation isn't about eating bitter.
There are an estimated 200 million Chinese born in the 1990s, shortly after the 1989 Tiananmen crackdown in Beijing, and another 160 million born in the 2000s. But more significantly, they have only known a China that's seen rapid economic growth.
In China, amongst young people, is not outrage, but a certain amount of despair. It's a feeling that their childhood was so driven by competition. And benchmarks in the young person's life in China come one after the other with high competition. And right now there's a feeling that, no matter how hard we work, we still can't get ahead.
China is, after all, facing fresh headwinds. The country's economy isn't growing at the same pace as before, with analysts expecting it to miss its annual growth target of around 5.5% this year, bringing new risks to President Xi Jinping as he seeks an unprecedented third term. Frustration has perhaps been reflected in buzzwords like 躺平 or lying flat, referring to a lifestyle that rejects overworking, and 内卷, literally curling inwards, which refers to excessive competition. This new cafe in Shanghai drawing crowds as it has sought to bring that feeling into its drinks.
首先，它是消费的主力。可能更多的咖啡爱好者，他就是想喝一杯好的咖啡。但是对于年轻人来讲，他觉得我不但能够喝到一杯咖啡，我还能被咖啡的所有的一些整合的联名的文化所吸引。它是时尚的，它是流行的。
But could China's new challenges now be affecting the consumption habits of this generation that it's counting on? And what would it mean for Mr. Xi's new China?
"我叫嘉欣，今年26岁，目前居住在广州。
The saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. But for 26-year-old Li Jiaxing, who lives in this old estate in southern China's Guangzhou city, perhaps don't judge a house by its exterior may be more applicable. While it may be difficult to imagine that this 72-square-meter modern oasis lies within a rundown building, it may be even harder to imagine that the house once looked like this.
上个租客搬走了，地上那边又没有打扫干净，然后瓷砖也是旧旧的，厕所也是比较脏的，厨房也是。然后当时可能别人看来不会租吧，但是我觉得这个房子很合我心意。
This led Jiaxing and her boyfriend to get their hands dirty, taking about 6 months to transform the place on their own. They pay just over $300 per month in rent, about half of what they paid to rent their previous apartment.
租金低嘛，也是为了一个以后存钱买房子，然后我也可以花点钱去改成我比较喜欢的风格，而且它也比较大嘛，也是我看中的一个点。
The couple said they spent about $1,600 on the facelift, an unusual move which was welcomed by their landlord, who also raised some curious questions.
他可能觉得我乱花钱，但是我觉得我是在认真过日子，所以我觉得我也没必要去反驳他，因为房子是租来的，生活是自己的。
It seems that Jiaxing's mentality has resonated with other young people. Documenting her experience on lifestyle platform Xiaohongshu, she's amassed over 81,000 followers so far. She even quit her graphic design job in April to become a full-time blogger. Now earning about $4,000 a month, almost double her previous income. Xiaohongshu says hashtags like rented home renovation, finding happiness in a rented home, and renovation budgeting have garnered hundreds of millions of views, with searches related to rented home renovation growing by close to 60% last year compared to 2020. This all comes as China's housing prices have skyrocketed in recent years, becoming out of reach for many young people. According to housing platform Ziroom, over 90% of new college graduates chose to rent last year.
你想买的稍微好一点的，有电梯的，就是400万吧，最少，首付也要120多万了。但是120多万对于我们刚毕业来说是一笔巨款，每个月还房贷压力也会比较大。
Though they're renting a flat now, Jiaxin and her boyfriend still intend to buy a house sometime in the future. So to prepare for their joint home purchase, Jiaxin's boyfriend transferred his hukou or household registration from his hometown to Guangzhou when they graduated in 2019. Under China's restrictive household registration system, those in most big cities can only buy a home if they're registered there, posing a dilemma especially as young people are attracted to China's big Tier 1 cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen.
我是徐玉安，然后呢，我是一个95后，来上海的话已经4年了。
When he was just 18 years old, Van made the big move from Chengdu in Sichuan province where he was studying to China's cosmopolitan financial hub, Shanghai. Jumping on the rented home decoration trend, this is the place he now calls home.
我老家是在成都很附近的一个小县城里面，虽然说老家很好，然后也很舒适，但可能不太适合年轻人发展。
Van recently moved from an apartment near his office in the city center to Shanghai's suburbs. His commuting time has doubled to an hour every day, and his rent has gone up from $400 to $660 a month. But he feels it's a small price to pay for a bigger space of his own. At 120 square meters, that's 4 times the size of his previous flat.
很多外人看起来会觉得啊。 你花了一个这么贵的房租租在了郊区，就觉得很不合适。但其实我自己内心有算过这笔账，因为我其实通勤坐地铁到公司的话也就6块钱，但是我原来住的稍微近一点点，可能每天我会选择打车上下班。而且我之后想要去哪个城市定居，想要去哪个城市长久留下来，我也没有确定好。那上海肯定是买不起的，这是肯定的。 也没有说我自己能力不行或者怎么样，就是买不起，这个也没有什么谦虚之类的。
Wang Hui is a senior analyst at Property Research Institute Beike. She says more young Chinese are choosing to delay their home purchases. Those buying a home in Tier 1 cities now exceed the age of 35. That's 2 to 3 years later compared to 2018.
很多年轻人购买第一套房子，那受到这个城市的限购或者限贷的政策的这个影响，那所以作为将这个租赁作为其中的一种过渡的居住选择。那另外一个呢，就是随着近几年国内住房租赁市场环境的出清，监管政策的不断的完善，包括有效租赁供给的这个增加啊，品质服务的增加，让很多人呢能够愿意接受租赁作为一种更好的生活方式。
At the start of the year, China announced plans to build 6.5 million new low-cost rental homes by 2025. Amid sky-high property prices, that's expected to meet the housing needs of 13 million young Chinese. But there's also the uncertainty of the sales market. Tough measures to rein in developers' debt have led to a slump in the property market and even a mortgage boycott, potentially causing social instability after a key twice-a-decade Communist Party Congress.
What their parents did, and then how much wealth gain their parents achieved through home buying represents the past history. Going forward, what will happen is what the young people should pay more attention to, because the future in China, it's not going to be a repeat of the last 30 years.
But will difficulties at home affect how young Chinese view their place and identity in the world?
是薛雷奇，我是91年生人。
Located in China's southeastern Jiangxi province, Jingdezhen is known as the porcelain capital of the world, producing its iconic wares for thousands of years. But in recent times, the prefecture-level city has seen fresh blood, attracting an increasing number of young Chinese. This includes 30-year-old entrepreneur and Wuxi native Xue Leiqi. He moved his work studio to Jingdezhen in 2017.
这边是全国罕有的一个，还保留的很完整的一个手艺的一个产业链的一个城市。其他城市可能手艺都已经完全被机械所替代了，但这边还保留着。还有呢，这边也吸引了一批同样是创作者的人，所以我觉得比较志同道合。
Once a font designer, he now turns two-dimensional words into 3D pieces of art, creating porcelain cups in the shape of Chinese characters for sale.
我在7、8岁的时候吧，也是去学这个书法班。我的经历就是被文言文所打动，对这个古诗当中汉字的很丰富的这个味道所打动。
Leiqi has been selling his pieces on e-commerce platform Taobao and was recently invited to showcase his wares at a festival organized by them. The event in Guangzhou seeks to highlight the latest consumption trends of young people. Among them, Guochao, literally meaning national wave, a category Leiqi's cups fall into.
造物节可能年轻人会比较多一些，所以我们也是选了一些比较有趣的字，比如说像这种一夜暴富。 如果是太过传统的东西，或者是它本身就是属于博物馆的，我们做的还是既要有古代的这种思考，古代的这种好的东西，同时也要有我们当下生活的一种感受吧。
Steffi Noel is Dashua Consulting's research director and has been studying the Guochao trend closely, defined as a preference for Chinese brands, designs, and culture across different industries. She says Gen Z is the main driving force behind the trend, with about 75% showing a preference for these products.
People born in the 90s, they were born with China already open to the world. They were also raised a lot, when you look at this generation, in the idea of like, I need to be unique. These two things combined together make the Guochao really powerful.
The market research firm says the Guochao trend was first seen in 2016, but has since picked up steam in recent years.
The whole US situation, or let's say Western versus like Asian world, this has really made some Chinese people like support more their own goods and protect more their own culture.
But for e-commerce brand Taobao, its event in Guangzhou is more than just highlighting what's on trend.
Now, just walking around the festival, and many of these brands showcasing their wares here may not be the most recognizable to visitors. And organizers tell me that this is intentional, as part of the focus has also been on highlighting smaller businesses and newer brands as part of their efforts in hopes of supporting young entrepreneurs.
This comes at a time when China's youth unemployment rate has hit record highs, hovering at around 20% this year.
每年新开店的商家当中，也有非常多是大学生以及95、90后的年轻人，所以针对年轻人，我们肯定也要针对他做一些帮助。
China's high youth unemployment rate is partly due to a record 10 million university graduates entering the job market this year, as well as the country's strict zero-COVID policies, which experts do not expect to change anytime soon, despite mounting frustration and anecdotal evidence that an increasing number of international firms have been moving out of China.
I'm very certain that they will, all the party leaders will come to address the employment issue, income issue for young people. But at this moment, as far as they're concerned, that's tomorrow's concern. As long as today the young people are not demonstrating on the street, causing troubles, then the time is on their side. So they can wait to address those issues tomorrow or maybe next year. But for the Many months of this year, the 20th Party Congress and the related transition, from one group of leadership to another. These are the top priority concerns for them.
My name is Huang Zihao. I was born in 2000.
22-year-old Huang Zihao moved to Singapore 2 months ago after graduating from university in Beijing earlier this year. His last few months on campus marked by strict zero-COVID policies.
So during that time, we are not allowed to go outside this campus, except for some, very emergency. I think the most difficult part for the most students is that I can tell that a lot of them are they're not physically affected, but they are mentally affected.
The tough competition in China's job market was also a deciding factor. The mathematics major said while he could have got a job in teaching, that was not in line with his aspirations. Instead, he decided to pursue a master's in quantitative finance in Singapore. But while he hopes to stay in the island state for the long term, he maintains that it will not affect his identity as a Chinese.
For my Chinese identity, I carry this identity wherever I go, and I'm very proud of to say that I'm Chinese. I was born in a very strong country, and it is getting more and more attention in the world right now.
China indeed has been thrust into the global spotlight in recent years as its economic and political footprint expands around the world.
There's no doubt that the way that China is covered actually fans the flame of nationalism within China. It's useful to the government to a certain extent to be able to show how China is misunderstood. And so, yeah, I would say this young generation feels a certain amount of pride, a certain amount of defensiveness about their standing in the world, as well as a reasonable amount of uncertainty about their own future.
How China's leadership and President Xi address that uncertainty, though, will be closely watched by the country's youth. It had been their forebears who had pushed for change for most of China's modern history, and this latest generation could yet reshape China as the country's global might rises.